Have you ever caught yourself wondering what it actually takes for an avoidant person to truly fall in love? I'm talking specifically about the dismissive avoidant type here, because let's face it, they tend to be the most challenging to figure out. Their walls are high, their signals are mixed, and just when you think you're getting somewhere, they often pull back. So, in this video, I want to walk you through the real stages of what happens when a dismissive avoidant actually develops deep feelings for someone. We're going to look at this through the lens of relationship phases because understanding where they are in that process makes all the difference in decoding their behavior. Most people don't realize that every relationship moves through 6 distinct stages, whether you're secure, anxious, or avoidant. It starts with the dating phase, that initial vetting period that usually lasts anywhere from 0 to 6 months. If both people decide to commit to something monogamous or at least exclusive in some form, they transition into the honeymoon stage, which typically stretches out for another year or year and a half. After that, every single couple hits the power struggle stage, and I mean every couple. Even securely attached people go through this, they're just better equipped to handle it with less chaos and quicker resolution. Statistically, most relationships end during this rocky stretch. But if you push through, you reach the rhythm stage where you finally find your groove and stability returns. From there, you move into devotion and eventually bliss, where breakups become far less likely. Now, here's where dismissive avoidants throw a curveball into that whole timeline. During the dating stage, they actually start off much like anyone else, falling into infatuation and projecting an idealized version of who the other person is. They're not immune to attraction or excitement, but here's the catch. They're famously slow to develop genuine romantic feelings. That infatuation doesn't automatically translate into emotional investment the way it might for other attachment styles. They tend to be more of a slow burn, taking their time to really let someone in. What makes them finally consider moving from dating into a real commitment comes down to a few very specific conditions that set them apart from the rest. The first condition is that they need to feel genuinely engaged on 3 distinct levels: emotionally, intellectually, and physically. A lot of people overlook the intellectual piece, but for a dismissive avoidant, that mental connection is absolutely non-negotiable. If they don't feel challenged and stimulated by the way you think, the rest of it won't sustain them long term. It's not enough to have chemistry or emotional warmth. They need someone who can hold their attention in conversation, who brings fresh perspectives, who keeps them curious. When all 3 pillars are solid, emotional depth, intellectual spark, and physical attraction, they start to believe the connection has real staying power. They begin to see a future there, even if they're not saying it out loud. The second thing that pushes them toward commitment is something that might surprise you. They need to feel absolutely no pressure from the other person. The moment they sense that someone is trying to lock them down or rush the process, their instinct is to retreat. That's why you'll sometimes notice dismissive avoidants chasing after fearful avoidants, because fearful avoidants tend to be great at intellectual sparring, and they challenge people in a way that feels intriguing rather than demanding. They create space, they don't crowd, and ironically, that freedom makes a dismissive avoidant want to lean in rather than run. So if you're wondering what actually makes them fall, it's not about grand gestures or relentless pursuit. It's about showing up consistently without making them feel trapped and letting the connection unfold on its own timeline. When it comes to emotional availability, fearful avoidants tend to show up in a way that really clicks with dismissive avoidants. They're usually very physically connected, and they place a little less weight on that romantic, mushy pillar, which honestly suits the dismissive avoidant perfectly. On top of that, fearful avoidants are pretty wishy-washy about commitment themselves. They're not pushing for labels or demanding certainty right out of the gate. And that combination, it's almost like a recipe that triggers the dismissive avoidant to start doing the chasing instead of the running. It doesn't happen every single time, but statistically you'll see this dynamic play out quite often. It's one of the few scenarios where a dismissive avoidant will actually pursue someone rather than keep them at a distance. And once that pursuit begins, the whole dynamic shifts in fascinating ways. Now, if a dismissive avoidant does decide to commit, usually because they genuinely feel no pressure to do so, they might even want to lock down that fearful avoidant or someone with that same energy. But the commitment itself isn't the finish line. What actually keeps them there long term is whether the relationship transforms into something where both people's needs are consistently met and where communication stays open, direct, and healthy. That's the real glue. Without that, no amount of initial attraction or intellectual spark will hold them. They need to see that the relationship can function smoothly without constant turbulence, that there's a mutual give and take that doesn't feel draining or demanding. And that's where a lot of couples stumble, because they assume once the commitment is made, the hard part is over, when in reality, it's just beginning. If you want to go even deeper into this pattern before we wrap up, I highly recommend checking out the self-love and self-compassion course we've put together. It's designed to help you strengthen your relationship with yourself, which honestly makes everything else easier, whether you're the avoidant one or you're trying to connect with one. And the best part? You get lifetime access completely free. The link is down below if that sounds like something you could benefit from. But for now, let's keep moving, because there's more to unpack about what dismissive avoidants actually need to stay engaged and fulfilled over the long haul. Dismissive avoidants have specific needs that, when met, make them soften and open up in ways that might surprise you. First and foremost, they need to feel truly accepted for who they are, not for who someone wants them to become. They crave a sense of safety and harmony in how conversations flow, because conflict and emotional intensity are major triggers for them. They also need space to maintain their own identity and independence, while still having dedicated time for connection with you. And here's something a lot of people overlook. They respond incredibly well to genuine acknowledgement and appreciation for the efforts they do make. If you're going to ask them to meet your needs, be direct about it. They actually handle directness much better than most people assume, but only when it's delivered with warmth and acceptance. For example, instead of saying, "You never spend time with me," try something like, "I really value our time together and I've been feeling a bit disconnected lately. Could we plan a fun date night this weekend?" That kind of approach makes them feel valued rather than criticized, and they almost always step up. I've seen this work consistently across thousands of people in our programs and years of client practice, so I can tell you with confidence that this approach genuinely makes a difference. But here's where things can go sideways really fast. If someone approaches a dismissive avoidant with negative framing, throwing out accusations like, "You don't care about me," or "You never make time for us," it hits them right in their deepest wounds. They don't hear a request for connection. They hear proof that they're failing, that they're inadequate, that no matter what they do, it's never enough. And when that happens, their nervous system essentially shuts down. They slip into what's called dorsal vagal shutdown mode, which is just a fancy way of saying they freeze, they retreat, they emotionally disappear. It's not that they don't care, it's that they genuinely don't know how to process that kind of criticism without feeling completely overwhelmed. So they pull back, sometimes for days, sometimes longer, and the connection suffers. Understanding this dynamic is absolutely crucial if you want to communicate effectively with someone wired this way. Now, the other piece that doesn't get talked about enough is that dismissive avoidants also need to feel like they can communicate their own needs without judgment or backlash. In many relationships, one person ends up leading the way with healthy, above-board communication, and eventually the avoidant starts to realize, "Oh wait, I can actually say what I need too, and it's not going to blow up in my face." That realization is a game changer for them. When they see that expressing vulnerability doesn't lead to shame or rejection, they slowly begin to open up more. And that's when the relationship really starts to deepen. So let's take a step back and really weave all of this together, because understanding how a dismissive avoidant falls in love isn't just about memorizing a checklist of stages or needs. It's about fundamentally shifting how you see connection, intimacy, and the quiet, often misunderstood inner world of someone who has spent their entire life learning to protect themselves by keeping others at a safe distance. And if you've made it this far, you're probably either in a relationship with someone like this, or you recognize these patterns in yourself. Either way, I want to honor the complexity of what we're talking about here, because dismissive avoidants are not cold, unfeeling robots, and they're not broken people who need to be fixed. They are human beings who have developed incredibly effective survival strategies that, at some point in their lives, kept them safe. The challenge is that those same strategies, when carried into adult relationships, often create the very distance and loneliness they were trying to avoid in the first place. And that's the painful irony at the heart of all of this. When we talk about the 6 stages of a relationship, it's easy to think of them as a simple timeline that everyone follows in the same way. But for a dismissive avoidant, each stage comes with its own unique set of hurdles, triggers, and opportunities for growth. The dating stage, for example, isn't just about getting to know someone and seeing if there's a spark. For a dismissive avoidant, it's about carefully evaluating whether this person is safe enough to let in, whether they'll demand too much too soon, whether they'll eventually become another source of pressure or disappointment. And because they're so attuned to potential threats, they often project their own fears onto the other person, seeing red flags where there might not be any, or interpreting normal bids for connection as signs that someone is trying to trap them. This hypervigilance is exhausting, and it's one of the main reasons why dismissive avoidants can appear so detached or uninterested. They're not uninterested, they're just terrified of what might happen if they actually let themselves care. The honeymoon stage, which is supposed to be this blissful period of excitement and discovery, can actually be quite stressful for a dismissive avoidant. Sure, there's attraction and infatuation, but there's also this nagging voice in the back of their mind whispering that this won't last, that the other person will eventually see the real them and walk away, or that they'll eventually become suffocating and demanding. So even in the good times, there's a part of them that's holding back, scanning for exits, testing the waters to see if the other person can handle their independence without crumbling. This is where the intellectual pillar becomes so critical. For a dismissive avoidant, feeling intellectually connected to someone provides a sense of safety and stability that emotional connection alone can't offer. It's like they need proof that this person can engage their mind, challenge their thinking, and keep up with them on a mental level before they're willing to risk the vulnerability of emotional intimacy. And if that intellectual spark is missing, no amount of physical attraction or emotional warmth will be enough to sustain their interest. Then we hit the power struggle stage, which is where most relationships either die or deepen. For a dismissive avoidant, this stage is particularly brutal because it forces them to confront all the things they've been trying to avoid: conflict, emotional intensity, the need to compromise and negotiate, and the terrifying realization that they can't control everything. When their partner expresses frustration or disappointment, their default response is to shut down, to withdraw, to convince themselves that this relationship is more trouble than it's worth. And honestly, a lot of them do walk away at this point. It's easier to run than to face the discomfort of working through issues. But here's what's so important to understand. If they stay, if they push through that instinct to flee, they have the opportunity to experience something they've never truly had before. A relationship that can withstand tension, that can repair after conflict, that doesn't collapse under the weight of honest communication. That experience is transformative, and it's often what sets the stage for the rhythm stage, where stability and harmony finally start to take root. Now, the reason we spent so much time talking about fearful avoidance and the chase dynamic is because it highlights something crucial about how dismissive avoidants operate. They are much more likely to pursue someone who doesn't seem desperate for their commitment, someone who has their own life, their own independence, and their own sense of mystery. That's why fearful avoidants, who are often just as conflicted about intimacy as dismissive avoidants are, tend to attract them so strongly. There's a push-pull dance that happens, where both parties are simultaneously drawn to and terrified of closeness, and that dynamic can create an intense, intoxicating energy. But here's the thing. While that chase might be exciting in the beginning, it's not sustainable. Eventually, someone has to break the cycle. Someone has to be willing to show up consistently, to communicate openly, to create a foundation of trust that doesn't depend on games or uncertainty. And that's where the real work begins. When a dismissive avoidant finally does commit, it's not a casual decision. It's something they've agonized over, weighed, analyzed, and ultimately chosen despite all their fears. So when they say yes to a relationship, they are saying yes to something that terrifies them, and that takes an enormous amount of courage. But commitment alone isn't enough. What keeps them there is the quality of the connection that follows. They need to feel that their needs are being met, not just occasionally, but consistently. They need to feel accepted for who they are, not for who someone wishes they would become. They need to feel that there's space for their independence, that they won't lose themselves in the relationship, and that their partner isn't going to punish them for needing time alone. And they need to feel appreciated for the efforts they do make, because for them, even showing up and staying present is a significant act of vulnerability. The communication piece cannot be overstated. We talked about how dismissive avoidants respond to direct, healthy communication versus negative, accusatory language. And this is genuinely one of the most practical takeaways from everything we've covered. If you can learn to express your needs in a way that doesn't trigger their defenses, you'll see a completely different side of them. They'll actually step up, they'll try harder, they'll meet you halfway. But if you communicate from a place of blame or criticism, they'll shut down every single time. It's not that they're incapable of empathy or compromise, it's that their nervous system perceives that kind of communication as a threat, and their survival instincts override everything else. So if you're in a relationship with a dismissive avoidant, one of the most loving things you can do is learn how to speak to them in a way that makes them feel safe rather than attacked. Now, let's talk about the long-term picture, because I think this is where a lot of people lose hope. They assume that dismissive avoidants are incapable of deep, lasting love, that they're emotionally stunted or doomed to a lifetime of superficial connections. And that's simply not true. Dismissive avoidants are capable of profound love, but it looks different from what we're culturally conditioned to expect. It's not the grand, sweeping, all-consuming passion of a movie romance. It's quieter, more grounded, more about actions than words. It's showing up day after day, choosing to stay, working through disagreements, and gradually allowing someone to see the parts of themselves they've kept hidden for so long. That kind of love takes time, and it takes patience, but it's real, and it's worth fighting for. I also want to address the dismissive avoidants who might be reading or watching this. If you see yourself in these patterns, I hope you know that none of this is your fault. You didn't choose to develop these defenses, and you didn't ask for the experiences that shaped you this way. But you do have a choice now, in this moment, about what you want to do next. You can continue to protect yourself at the cost of genuine connection, or you can start to take small, brave steps toward letting people in. And those steps don't have to be huge. They can be as simple as staying present during a difficult conversation, or telling your partner something vulnerable, or allowing yourself to receive love without immediately pushing it away. Every time you do that, you're rewiring your brain, telling yourself that connection is safe, that you are worthy of love just as you are, that you don't have to do this alone. And for those of you who are on the other side of this dynamic, who love someone who is avoidant, I see you, and I know how hard this journey can be. It's exhausting to love someone who seems to push you away, who struggles to express their feelings, who needs so much space that it sometimes feels like they're not even in the relationship. But if you're still here, if you're still trying, it means you see something in them worth fighting for. And that's beautiful. Just remember to take care of yourself in the process. You can't pour from an empty cup, and you can't love someone into being ready for connection if they're not willing to do their own work. So set boundaries, protect your own heart, and don't lose sight of your own worth in the process of loving someone else. What I really want to leave you with is this: attachment styles are not destiny. They are patterns that were formed in response to early experiences, and patterns can be changed. It takes time, it takes effort, and it takes a willingness to be uncomfortable, but it is absolutely possible. Whether you're the avoidant one or you're the person loving an avoidant, the path forward is the same. It's about building safety, practicing communication, showing up with compassion, and giving each other the grace to be imperfect. It's about understanding that love is not about finding someone who completes you, but about finding someone who is willing to walk alongside you as you both grow. And if you're feeling overwhelmed by all of this, that's completely okay. This is complex stuff, and there's no shame in needing support. That's why we've created resources like the Self-Love and Self-Compassion course, because the foundation of any healthy relationship is the relationship you have with yourself. When you truly believe that you are worthy of love, you stop settling for connections that don't honor you, and you stop accepting behavior that hurts you. You also become better at giving love freely without the constant fear that you're not enough. So take advantage of those resources, reach out for help when you need it, and never stop believing that deep, meaningful connection is available to you. So if you pull all of this together, here's what the recipe looks like. Early on, you build that intellectual connection alongside the emotional and physical pillars. You create an environment where commitment feels like a choice, not a demand. And then, once they're in, you maintain healthy communication and mutual need exchange through all the later stages of the relationship. That combination is what makes a dismissive avoidant not just commit, but genuinely want to stay for the long haul. They start to feel safe, seen, and valued, and that's when their walls begin to come down naturally. I really hope this gives you some clarity on a dynamic that can feel so confusing and frustrating at times. Thank you for being here, for being willing to explore these difficult topics, and for caring enough to understand yourself and the people you love on a deeper level. This work matters, and so do you. I'll see you in the next video, and in the meantime, take care of yourself and the people who matter most to you.